这里我可不来。
Luo Feng stood alone above the chaotic airflow, facing three towering ice mountains. To any normal great being, even a universe master, these mountains would be crushing to look at. But what was truly terrifying wasn't their size. It was the law engravings inside them. Meteor-like rays of light danced within the ice, each one a perfect law diagram. Just watching them was a form of cultivation. In this universe, understanding the laws isn't about reading a book. It's about observing the fundamental operating system of reality itself. And these engravings were the final, true secrets of the blade path, left behind by Duan Dong River's lineage. Luo Feng was completely immersed. Half a year passed in the outside world, but his remote ocean body was cultivating, inside a miniature universe, where time flows 10,000 times faster. For him, it was 5,000 years of non-stop comprehension, and his understanding of the blade was increasing by leaps and bounds. He finally understood why even Star River Master's famous combination technique, River in the Dark, felt flawed to him now. In the world of Swallowed Star, there are two kinds of combinations. One is a shortcut. You take a strong secret technique and forcefully pair it with a supporting one, like a miniature universe to trap your enemy. It looks powerful, but the intention behind it is lazy. It's like gluing two weapons together. A true combination is different. It must be born from the same source, the same law origin, fused perfectly from the start. Luo Feng summoned his blade. Absolute guest. Ever since he obtained the crazy demon extermination godly armor, his strongest armor, his main battle technique, became extermination god. So this blade was rarely used. Now it had a purpose again. Foggy light, he whispered. Foggy light was once just an ultimate technique of a universe overlord. But after studying the secret engraving diagrams in the Boat of Mausoleum, Luo Feng had upgraded it step by step until it became a strongest secret technique of a universe master. This shows a core principle of this world. Studying law diagrams to create techniques is far more direct and efficient than comprehending laws the traditional way. He moved. Hua! A single hazy thread appeared in the void, left behind by his blade. It was dreamlike, filled with the essence of foggy light. Then a second thread, a third. Soon thousands, tens of thousands of fog-like threads filled heaven and earth. They weren't just light. Each one was a blade edge, and their speed and power were constantly increasing as they multiplied. Then all the threads collapsed together. Hong! The countless foggy threads transformed into a single, colossal blade shadow that filled the entire void. When it brushed past, it didn't cut, it wiped. Like a cloth wiping dust from a mirror, it erased everything in space itself, a terrifying, silent power. The first move shall be named Foggy Light Void Space. Creating this combination was not hard for Luo Feng now. After years of solving the Rhinoceros Emperor game, which trains comprehension itself, and studying the Ninth Deep Abyss's techniques, his ability to create techniques was at the peak of the universe masters. The concept was superimposition, continuously layering, foggy light upon itself until it reached a perfect limit, then releasing all of it at once. At that moment, a cold, mechanical voice echoed from the dark star above him. The first move of candidate's blade technique has been created. Luo Feng looked up and frowned. He realized this entire inheritance space was monitoring him. The system could tell whether a technique was truly your own creation or just something you learned, because the power you unleash with your own technique is fundamentally different. My combination hasn't met the requirement? The expectations are that high? He wasn't satisfied. After seeing the 3 ice mountains and the 360 blade manuals, Foggy Light Void Space, which was stronger than River in the Dark and comparable to 5 Chaos, Master's Great Extermination, now felt like a substandard shortcut. He went back to comprehending. The more he studied, the more profound the inheritance felt. So profound that his own creation started to feel shabby. Inside Huge Axe Creator's miniature universe, his remote ocean body sat cross-legged, his godly power forming shadow figures that executed blade techniques non-stop. He was creating sets of techniques at an unbelievable speed. This is the advantage of the secret engraving diagram path. Even when his achievement was only at Universe Knight level, he once created Golden Light by luck, an ultimate technique of a Universe Master. Now his achievement was nearing the limit of a Universe Master. and his understanding of the blade was deeper. Compared to the 360 manuals, my blade is too weak. The path of the golden space should be much stronger. That feeling in his heart burned. For 9 years in the inheritance land, which was tens of thousands of years for his other body, he let that feeling build until it broke through. He drew absolute guest again. Clang! The sound of the blade rang through the void. Upon flipping my palms, there will be one universe, rise. His blazing godly power spread out like a vast sky, forming its own miniature universe with Luo Feng as the core. This is the ultimate display of law control, creating a universe. Then this miniature universe suddenly shrank, collapsed violently and transformed. 10,081 dazzling golden blade rays burst out, perfectly complementing each other, hacking towards a single point. It was like watching a giant star expand and then instantly collapse into a black hole. The power was beyond even a self-destruction of a great being. Luo Feng's face was filled with excitement and emotion. He whispered, "This move has reached the limit of the golden space path. 10,081 possibilities of golden space evolution, all combined into one. Only the destruction of a universe can bear this power. This is a true combination of ultimate techniques, even a notch higher than 5 chaos. Master's ultimate technique that relied on 5 combined laws. This move shall be called Golden Universe." The cold voice sounded again. The second move of candidate's blade technique has been created. Luo Feng waited. Silence. He frowned again. "I created this move, yet I still can't meet Duan Dong River's expectation? Even this is not enough? Could it be I must create a Universe Supreme Master level technique?" Foggy light void space was already a stellar combination. Golden Universe was the absolute, perfect limit of what a Universe Master could achieve on the golden space path. Theoretically, there was no way to surpass it without breaking through to become a Universe Supreme Master. But that was the impossible mission. In the entire Universe Ocean, without breaking through, creating a Supreme Master technique is considered impossible. Of course, Luo Feng had done the impossible before, creating golden light as a Universe Knight. So theoretically, with his near-limit Universe Master achievement in diagrams, plus the 360 manuals and 3 mountains as guidance, there was still a sliver of possibility, because Duan Dong River wouldn't leave an arrangement that was truly impossible. "I will have to take a gamble," he gritted his teeth. And he wasn't alone in this frustration. In another inheritance land, Blue Blood Knight stared at his 2 ice mountains, murmuring that he felt a move had reached the ultimate limit of time and space. In another, Deer Bug Master, a 6th tier, Universe Master with experience from countless reincarnation eras and backed by purple. Moon Ancestor had already easily created 2 perfect Universe Master level techniques, but was also stuck. He knew Holy Land universes cannot breed Supreme Masters, so he was locked at this level. Yet the law engravings were the true combination of all laws. At this moment, all the aged Universe Masters, from East Emperor and Purple, Moon Holy Lands, who had passed the 2nd, bottleneck had 36, manuals and an ice mountain. Those who only passed the first bottleneck had only an ice mountain, no manual at all. Yet none dared to give up. Every one of them coveted that. Slightest trace of possibility, the chance to receive the core inheritance of Duan Dong River's lineage. Unable to become a Universe Supreme Master, yet having to create a secret technique that was on the level of a Universe Supreme Master, this was like a gigantic barrier that nature had set before their paths, hindering Luo Feng, Deer Bug Master, Yozan Master, Blue Blood Knight, and the various other great beings. Within Universe Ocean, there could be simply no solution at all. Even Luo Feng's teacher, Primal Chaos City Leader, would not be able to achieve it either, but now, Duan Dong River was obviously forcing them to succeed. This tells us how extreme Duan Dong River's inheritance is. It doesn't test what you currently are, it tests whether you can do what the entire Universe Ocean believes is impossible. Time flew by. Within the blink of an eye, another 3 decades passed. In the virtual universe, Luo Feng sat cross-legged with a great quantity of 3-dimensional virtual shadows from the Rhinoceros Emperor game surrounding him. His brows were furrowed as he looked at the primitive giant. "Huge Axe Creator, I have been thinking very hard, but I still cannot find a stronger blade technique. Would Huge Axe Creator like to give me some pointers on how I should advance?" Huge Axe Creator, also seated cross-legged, replied, Within that ancient civilization, the inheritance from the pulse of Duan Dong River is extremely powerful, so they set very stringent requirements for their heirs. For him to have such a demand, naturally there would be such a possibility. Luo Feng nodded. He was aware of that possibility, but where could he find it? He had been studying and pondering diligently, but had made no progress at all. This feeling was antagonizing. Besides, according to the Golden Space Path, Golden Universe was theoretically at its perfect limit. How else could he achieve a breakthrough? If he himself could not find any traces of flaws, then there was no way he could further perfect it. Huge Axe nodded and said, "I have asked Teacher Origin before." "Teacher Origin?" Luo Feng's eyes lit up. "Yes." Huge Axe nodded, then slowly said, "Teacher Origin said, if you want a breakthrough, the source lies within the 3 mountains of blades." Luo Feng gave a slight frown as he muttered to himself in silence. The source was within the 3 mountains of blades? This is a key teaching point in Swallowed. Star. The answer is always hidden in the Yi, inheritance itself. The 3 mountains are not just scenery, they are the ultimate law engravings. Huge Axe creator continued to say, "The 3 mountains of blades contain the ultimate mysterious existence that can possibly help you create a secret technique of the level of a Universe Supreme Master, even though your achievement in the studies of diagrams of secret engravings is limited to the level of a Universe Master. This is what we mean by executing and creating, yet not necessarily truly understanding." Executing and creating, yet not necessarily truly understanding? Luo Feng nodded slightly. This is a profound concept. It means you can use and even create something far beyond your current comprehension level by mimicking the perfect form of law engravings, just like a child can trace a masterpiece without being a master painter. "What Teacher Origin said makes sense," Luo Feng whispered. "Previously, I was able to create golden light. Today, I will be able to create something even stronger. Actually, judging from the experiences of countless great beings from the universe ocean, the possibility of creating a secret technique at the level of a Universe Supreme Master was 0. Yet the 3 icebergs gave this situation a trace of hope. Difficult. Simply too difficult. It was not just Luo Feng who was stuck at this stage. There were a few other great beings from East Emperor, Holy Land who were stuck at the same stage, and even Blue Blood Knight, who had spent 20 years to create a perfect secret technique at the level of a Universe Master, was stuck at the same stage. "Ancestor, there is no hope at all." Blue Blood Knight sat on the leaf of a huge tree, filled with distress and anxiety. Painstakingly I searched, yet I could not find any inspiration at all. "Ancestor." Yan Zan Master also wore an anxious expression. "East Emperor Holy Land has existed for an endlessly long time, and there wasn't a single time when a Universe Master could create a secret technique at the level of a Universe Supreme Master. How am I going to achieve a breakthrough? Do please give me some guidance, Ancestor." The other candidates simply sat cross-legged on the leaves of that huge tree and listened. This was within a certain space belonging to East Emperor Holy Land, where time was accelerated by 10,000 times. The entire plain was mainly occupied by an ancient tree that had countless leaves. At that moment, the great beings, including East Emperor Ancestor himself, sat cross-legged on the tree leaves. "Those are engravings of laws that you all have yet to come across before." East Emperor Ancestor's entire being radiated a faint green light, and he was seated far away, where he slowly said, "Engravings of laws are where all the mysteries and secrets of laws can be found. With these engravings of laws as guidance, you will find that the door to progress will be opened for you." The group of great beings looked at one another. The door to progress would be opened? "Comprehend carefully," East Emperor Ancestor said without a second thought. "Do not allow yourself to slacken. When someone among you has finally comprehended the secret technique of a Universe Supreme Master, then it is time for the other candidates to all be annihilated." "Understood," a few dozen candidates answered deferentially. In Purple Moon Holy Land, Purple Moon Ancestor smiled and looked down at the various candidates. "Since Duan Dong River gave you all mountains of icebergs, then by all means the secret must lie within those engravings of the laws. Comprehend carefully and you will gain something. Abandon all kinds of thoughts you had previously. meticulously study and comprehend those engravings of laws from various perspectives. Dear Bugmaster was among the first few to answer. Understood. Great beings from other groups of powers of universe ocean were all at a loss for words when questioned by their own candidates. This was because even they had not seen those engravings of laws before, so they could only reply, "Since there is only a mountain of iceberg, then the path to take should naturally fall within the iceberg. We just have to comprehend carefully. The great beings who made it into the space of inheritance definitely gained much, especially the universe masters. Most of them originally only possessed the capability up to the 4th or 5th level, but under the guidance of the engravings of law, depending on the length of time spent, they were able to create, one by one, the most perfect combination of strongest secret technique at the level of a universe master. If they could make it out alive, all of them would naturally become top-tiered existences at the 5th level. What a pity that out of them all, only one was fated to survive. Years went by. Luo Feng had thoroughly studied all 360 blade manuals and memorized them by heart. His whole mind and body were immersed into careful comprehension of the 3 icebergs, the engravings of laws, just a single engraving of law. Luo Feng's gaze chased after that, meteor-like light, which was flying high and low, creating streams of light shaped into perfect arcs. It looked simple, yet it contained endless meaning. As he watched, that stream of light seemed to grow bigger and thicker, as though it was an incomparably large rainbow. The edges of the rainbow had countless blade shadows, which were either gentle like water, stable as a mountain, or fiery like flames. Every blade shadow had an extremely complex diagram of secret engravings, so complex that it far surpassed what Luo Feng had once seen before in the greatest ultimate diagram of secret engravings found within the 9th deep abyss. This was something Luo Feng could not comprehend. Countless blade shadows perfectly conformed to one, another to compose a gigantic rainbow. This rainbow resembled a simple stream of meteor-like light. This is the ultimate truth of law. Engravings, they are detached from any individual law because they contain all laws. Gold, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, light, lightning, space, gold space, water space, wooden space, even water time and gold time. Uncountable secrets seem to be completely fused, yet at times they are only partially fused. Luo Feng was intoxicated by everything he saw. His left eye kept watch on that meteor-like light, while his right eye was engaged in watching the 3 mountains of icebergs and countless meteor-like light, rays that were intertwining with one another to form the magnificent and unpredictable blade technique that was so mystical. Left eye, right eye, one to the meteor-like light, the other to the 3 mountains of blades, reflecting and mirroring one another. That was when a mystery arose. Luo Feng was well versed in the gold law, space law, and golden space law. As for the other laws, when he was studying the diagrams of secret engravings, he only managed to acquire scraps of information about them. Even though his comprehension was not high, there was still some understanding, which was why, when he was looking, Luo Feng could only distinctly identify the blade figure that was mainly based on golden space. While looking, all the blade techniques in the 360 blade manuals were still hovering in his mind, appearing one by one and mirroring one another. With these in his mind, Luo Feng could even naturally create one blade technique after another, all in search of the feeling of looking at the engravings of laws. He could work hard on creating a blade technique with that sort of unique quality. It was just that the blade technique might be too weak or might already be incomplete from the very beginning. But Luo Feng was not bothered by those thoughts. He still continued creating. Time passed. Luo Feng was unaware of how much time had passed. He was completely immersed in the creating process. Unknowingly, he had finished the analysis of space law. He had even managed to acquire the skill of using all the secret techniques of wood law, water law, fire law, and earth law. Although he had not meant to comprehend these 4 fundamental laws, due to his overly profound comprehension, the way of utilizing the secret techniques of the 4 laws was naturally comprehended over time. If he'd had the intention to comprehend these 4 major laws, he would probably have achieved complete comprehension within 2 to 3 days. Gold, space, yet to become gold, wood, water, fire, earth. Annihilate gold? He did not know how long he spent on comprehending. Space was originally divided into 5 different types, namely gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. During his long period of comprehending, Luo Feng had familiarized himself with these 5 spaces, and when both eyes were looking at the icebergs, one would focus on the intrinsic qualities, while the other would focus on the external phase in search of the ultimate secrets. Along the way, he had discerned a new route. "This is the blade I am looking for." Luo Feng grasped absolute, guessed blade, and silently rose to stand above the chaotic airflow. He wielded his blade, a brilliant ray that sliced across the vast sky instantly. There was an upsurge of light rays that converged into a dark, gigantic sphere. Countless blade rays were suppressed within this black sphere. A single blade ray could actually transform into this black, gigantic sphere within an instant to reach a height of 10 billion kilometers. The black sphere suddenly split apart from the middle. A dazzling golden light appeared, but it vanished in a flash. A clearly visible mark could be seen within the entire space of inheritance. There it remained. "I see it. A new life." Luo Feng shut his eyes as tears flowed. He was genuinely touched from the bottom of his heart. This single move had allowed him to advance to an entirely new level. This is what true breakthrough feels like. Not just power, but evolution. "Candidate has created the 3rd form of blade technique," the cold, mechanical voice said in Luo Feng's ears. "An heir has emerged." The other candidates. Annihilate. During that long period, all the candidates had seemed to have lost their sanity as they immersed themselves within the icebergs. Suddenly, an intangible force fell from the star high above and landed directly upon every single one of the candidates. "No!" Blue Blood's eyes widened as his face registered fear. "No, it should have been me. I should be the one succeeding." Thereafter, he lay there unmoving. His godly body looked the same, but his soul was annihilated. Deer Bug Master, who was in the midst of comprehending, registered a change in expression. Then he too remained where he was, unmoving. One by one, the great beings froze instantly, as if they had become blocks of ice. They had all been annihilated, leaving behind their godly bodies. At the same time, the divided bodies of these great beings in the other miniature universes, and even those in the primal universe, were all annihilated. The moment an heir was born, the others were annihilated. It was an ironic form of celebration. The moment candidate after candidate began falling, the atmosphere across the universe ocean changed completely. Purple Moon Ancestor had placed his greatest hope in Deer Bug Master, so seeing him fail was a serious blow. But the bigger problem was that Purple Moon had no way of knowing who had succeeded. His thoughts immediately narrowed the possibilities. If Deer Bug Master had failed, then the inheritance could only have gone to one of the strongest. Remaining candidates, either Luo Feng or Blue Blood, Knight from Eastern Emperor Holy Land. And this uncertainty reveals just how important the inheritance had become. For the nearly 100 powers competing across the universe ocean, this was not simply another treasure. The inheritance represented a possible path toward transcending reincarnation itself. That is why even the most powerful factions were now watching the reactions of their rivals, trying to determine who had survived. Purple Moon Ancestor understood that Eastern Emperor Holy Land might hold the answer. If Blue Blood Knight had also fallen, then the conclusion would become obvious. Luo Feng had won, and that exact realization was beginning to spread. Inside a dimension of Eastern Emperor Holy Land, the candidates who had been sitting upon the leaves of the ancient tree suddenly collapsed one after another. Among them was Blue Blood Knight. Eastern Emperor immediately recognized what that meant. His expression hardened. "Human Milky Way Horde leader? Luo Feng?" The same question was spreading throughout the entire universe ocean. Who had obtained the inheritance? Was it the human race? Was it Eastern Emperor Holy Land? Or had another faction somehow produced an unexpected victor? No one could immediately confirm the answer. But Eastern Emperor Holy Land had seen Blue Blood Knight fall. That made the conclusion almost unavoidable. Luo Feng had become the new inheritor of Duan Dong River, and Luo Feng wasted no time announcing the result to humanity. He sent a message directly to Huge Axe creator and Primal Chaos City leader. The message was simple. He had succeeded. This moment represents the payoff of everything that came before it. The competition had involved countless candidates, enormous factions, and an inheritance valuable enough to change the future balance of the universe ocean. Now, humanity had won. Even teacher Origin understood the significance. The silent struggle surrounding the inheritance was ultimately a struggle over the future of entire races. If Luo Feng could carry this inheritance forward, then humanity would no longer be merely another reincarnation-era power competing for survival. It could potentially become the foundation of a third holy land. But Luo Feng did not stop to celebrate. His attention immediately returned to Duan Dong River. Inside the inheritance space, a cold mechanical voice delivered a final message. Other candidates die. The countless competitors had failed. Only Luo Feng remained. Then Duan Dong River appeared before him. But something had changed. Luo Feng respectfully addressed him as Master Duan Dong River. Duan Dong River smiled and corrected him. He did not want to be called Master. He wanted Luo Feng to call him Teacher. That distinction carries an important meaning. Luo Feng was no longer merely a candidate receiving an inheritance. He had become the next successor in a lineage that had continued through countless generations. Duan Dong River was the previous inheritor. Luo Feng was the next. And from this point forward, Duan Dong River would serve as both his teacher and his guide. Then came another revelation. The three icebergs that Luo Feng had spent so much effort studying suddenly disappeared. With a wave of Duan Dong River's hand, Luo Feng was stunned. To him, those icebergs had contained incredibly valuable knowledge. But Duan Dong River explained that Luo Feng didn't need to worry. There were 820 basic inheritances available to him. The icebergs he had just studied were only part of the foundation. The true treasure was the core inheritance. That immediately changed Luo Feng's perspective. Duan Dong River then brought him deeper into the inheritance space. There, Luo Feng saw hundreds of glowing entrances suspended in the sky. There were 820 portals, each connected to one of the basic inheritances. Duan Dong River then demonstrated his absolute control over this space by making all those entrances disappear. This tells us something important about the inheritance space itself. It isn't merely a storage room filled with techniques. It is an entire specialized environment constructed to preserve and transmit the inheritance of Duan Dong River from one generation to the next. Duan Dong River even explained that this inheritance space was more valuable than ordinary, supreme true treasures, and was even more special than some miniature universes. For Luo Feng, it was essentially an entire world dedicated to inheritance. Then Duan Dong River brought him to an even deeper location. Luo Feng found himself standing on top of a mountain. Mist covered everything below. There was no visible ground. And then he saw it. A human sculpture. At first glance, it looked ordinary. But the moment Luo Feng sensed the power contained within it, he realized that this was something far beyond his current understanding. Duan Dong River introduced the figure. It was the third ancestral teacher, Duan Dong River Jueyi Saint King. And this revelation explained why the inheritance was so extraordinary. Duan Dong River wasn't merely passing down a collection of techniques. He was continuing a lineage that had once produced an existence, standing at the pinnacle of his civilization. The naming system itself reflected the status of each inheritor. Duan Dong River explained that every successor shared the name Duan Dong River, while their individual names came afterward. He was the 192nd inheritor. His name was Duan Dong River Zhenjue Wu, and Luo Feng would become the 193rd. His future name would be Duan Dong River Luo Feng. For Luo Feng, this was more than a title. It meant he was officially becoming part of this ancient lineage. But the next revelation was even more shocking. Duan Dong River explained that the third ancestral teacher was not merely powerful by the standards Luo Feng knew. The beings Luo Feng called Universe Supreme. Masters were called true gods in Duan Dong River's homeland. And even true gods were only considered a threshold toward the higher levels of that ancient civilization. This completely changes the scale of power. Luo Feng's current understanding of the universe ocean had been built around Universe Masters and Universe Supreme Masters. But the ancient civilization possessed a much larger hierarchy. What Luo Feng considered the peak was, according to Duan Dong River, only an intermediate threshold in his homeland. And the third ancestral teacher had gone far beyond that. He had reached a level where countless great beings acknowledged him. That was why he earned the title Saint King. Duan Dong River himself had received only the character Wu, because although he had been respected by countless beings, He had never reached the same level as the legendary saints and kings. Then came another astonishing detail. The third ancestral teacher had perfected the Duan Dong River inheritance. And throughout its history, 9 inheritors had reached the level of saints. That meant Luo Feng had not merely obtained a powerful technique. He had inherited one of the greatest lineages in the entire ancient civilization. No wonder he felt fortunate. The inheritance had already produced beings who stood at the highest levels of their civilization. Now Luo Feng was being added to that lineage. Duan Dong River then gave him the final instruction. He had to kneel before the third ancestral teacher. Luo Feng approached the prepared futon. He knelt. Then he kowtowed. Peng! The moment his head touched the rock, something extraordinary happened. Countless black rays suddenly erupted from the place, where he knelt and poured directly into his body. At the same time, the sculpture of the third ancestral teacher began emitting its own light. The two forces converged upon Luo Feng. Then came a single command. Inherit! Even Luo Feng's extraordinarily powerful will could not completely withstand the sensation. He grunted as black and white streams of light entered between his eyebrows. A strange inheritance mark formed there. Duan Dong River watched silently. For him, this was an emotional moment. The simple act of kneeling represented something far greater. A lineage that had survived through generations had finally found its next successor. And Duan Dong River's final thought made the significance unmistakable. Duan Dong River, Luo Feng. From this moment onward, you are Duan Dong River. Luo Feng's entire body trembled as he gripped the rocks beneath him. A black and white mark appeared between his eyebrows, almost as though an invisible force were forcibly branding his soul. Then, just as suddenly, the mark disappeared from sight. But it had not truly vanished. It had become a permanent part of him. This imprint was not merely a symbol of succession. It was the key that connected Luo Feng to the entire inheritance space. Duan Dong River explained that every inheritor throughout the lineage had received the same imprint. It was created by the third-generation ancestor, and every successor had to carry it. The reason was simple. The inheritance space itself needed a way to recognize its rightful successor, and that tells us something important about the scale of what Luo Feng had inherited. This was not an ordinary treasure that could simply be picked up and controlled. The space of inheritance was described as being more valuable than a miniature universe and far more precious than ordinary. Supreme true treasures. Something of that level naturally required an equally extraordinary method of recognizing its master. The imprint was that method. But there was another complication. Duan Dong River himself still controlled the inheritance space. His physical body had already been destroyed. Yet he had left behind a virtual consciousness containing his thoughts, memories, and personality. In other words, the inheritance had preserved a version of its previous successor specifically, so that it could wait for the next qualified inheritor. That virtual consciousness wasn't merely there to speak with Luo Feng. It was still exercising control over the inheritance space. And before Luo Feng could truly become its master, Duan Dong River had to voluntarily surrender that control. But there was one condition first. An oath, Duan Dong River ordered. Luo Feng to swear that the core inheritance of the Duan Dong River lineage would never fall into the hands of outsiders. If he violated that oath, his soul would be annihilated. Luo Feng hesitated, and his hesitation was completely understandable. He was a universe knight, and he already possessed the ability to resurrect. So what would happen if he died and was resurrected? Duan Dong River gave him the answer. The inheritance imprint would remain with him even after resurrection. If Luo Feng broke the oath, the imprint itself could annihilate his soul. And if he resurrected again, the same process would happen again. That means resurrection would not provide an escape from the oath. The consequence would repeat endlessly. This is an important distinction. The oath wasn't simply a promise based on Luo Feng's character. The inheritance itself had been designed to enforce the promise, so Luo Feng repeated the oath. His words echoed through his mind as the inheritance imprint reacted. The condition was now established. As long as Luo Feng protected the core inheritance from outsiders, nothing would happen. But if he betrayed that responsibility, the inheritance would punish him directly. With the oath completed, Duan Dong River finally began showing Luo Feng the true treasures hidden inside this inheritance space. A spatial door appeared. The two stepped through. and the scenery completely changed. Endless water surrounded a small island. On that island stood an ordinary wooden house beside a curved pond. At first, the scene looked almost peaceful, but Duan Dong River pointed toward the water. 3 black crystal-like stones were floating above the pond. These were called memory stones, also known as inheritance stones. And these 3 stones were far more important than their ordinary appearance suggested. They represented the roots of the entire Duan Dong River lineage. The stones could store enormous quantities of information, even the memories of extremely powerful beings. But that was only the beginning. Duan Dong River then lifted the water from the pond. Beneath it, Luo Feng saw countless black stones. There were 12,002 memory stones in total, and these weren't random collections of information. They contained knowledge covering an enormous range of subjects: close combat, long-range attacks, treasure refinement, automatons, cultivation methods, and many other fields. Each individual stone contained knowledge valuable enough to cause powerful factions to fight over it. Then Duan Dong River revealed something even more shocking. The surrounding ocean was also filled with memory stones. Not thousands, not millions, hundreds of millions. Most of these contained relatively basic information gathered by generations of Duan Dong River inheritors as they traveled through their civilization. According to Duan Dong River, at least 90% of the basic knowledge of his home civilization had been recorded in these stones. Although much of it was elementary, Luo Feng immediately understood what he was looking at. It was essentially a gigantic library. Not just a library of books, but a library containing the accumulated knowledge of an ancient civilization. And that is why the inheritance was so terrifying. A single technique could make powerful beings fight over it. But this space contained an enormous collection of techniques, memories, and cultivation knowledge. The 12,002 stones inside the pond were even more important. They represented the core knowledge accumulated by generations of inheritors. And above all of them were the 3 original memory stones. Duan Dong River warned Luo Feng that the information within those stones could never fall into the hands of outsiders. Luo Feng understood. Then came the moment when he finally accessed the core inheritance. He extended his godly power toward the 3 black stones. The moment his power touched them, they reacted. A faint light appeared. Ancient and complicated engravings emerged across their surfaces. Then an enormous amount of information surged directly into Luo Feng's consciousness. The transmission was so massive that even Luo Feng required an entire day before it was completely transferred. And when he finally opened his eyes, he was stunned. Because the true essence of the Duan Dong River inheritance wasn't simply thousands of techniques. It was concentrated into 3 lost knowledges. Their names were Duan Dong River, and each represented an entirely different aspect of survival and combat. Duan, annihilation. Duan, short for Duan Mie, was a technique focused on releasing enormous amounts of power from the user's body. Its concept could be compared to self-destruction, but with one enormous difference. Self-destruction releases everything at once and destroys the user in the process. Duan provided control. The user could control how quickly the godly body was burned, how much power was released, and how long the amplification lasted. Instead of sacrificing everything in one uncontrollable explosion, the user could regulate the output. That meant the technique could transform the user's existing power into an extremely powerful combat burst while maintaining control over the process. The educational point here is important. Raw energy isn't always the deciding factor. Control over energy can be just as important as the amount of energy itself. Self-destruction represents maximum release without control. Dan represents maximum release with control. That difference makes the technique dramatically more versatile. Dong, East Brilliance. The second lost knowledge was Donghua, meaning East Brilliance. This one focused on escape. When activated, the user could transform into a stream of brilliance and travel through layers of space at astonishing speed. So while Duan represented overwhelming offensive power, Dong represented survival through mobility. And together, the 2 techniques already created a powerful combination. If you could overpower your enemy, use Duan. If you couldn't overpower them, use Dong to escape. But the third lost knowledge was perhaps the most frightening of all. River. Undying River. The third was Undying River. Its purpose was fundamentally different. It focused on preserving life, The technique allowed a powerful being to separate a portion of its body from the main body and preserve it independently. The example given by Duan Dong River was extraordinary. Even if a divided body was destroyed by a soul attack, a specially refined drop of blood could potentially survive. That remaining blood could then absorb energy and reconstruct the original body. In other words, the technique created another layer of protection against complete annihilation. And now the three techniques form a remarkable strategic system. Duan gives you overwhelming power. Dong gives you the ability to escape. River gives you another path to survival. Power, mobility, survival. Three different answers to the three most important problems a great being faces in battle. That is why Luo Feng was so shocked. These weren't simply three powerful techniques added to his arsenal. They represented the accumulated essence of three generations of ancestral knowledge. And according to Duan Dong River, every generation of inheritors would normally possess only one of these, three lost knowledges. Yet Luo Feng had now gained access to the core inheritance containing all three. That explains why the inheritance had attracted the attention of both Eastern Emperor Holy Land and Purple Moon Holy Land. The competition wasn't really about obtaining another powerful treasure. It was about obtaining a complete system of ancient knowledge capable of dramatically changing the future. Strength of whoever inherited it, and Luo Feng had just become its newest successor. For the first time, he could truly understand why Duan Dong River had demanded such an extreme selection process. The inheritance wasn't looking for someone who was merely strong. It was looking for someone capable of carrying an entire civilization's accumulated knowledge into the future. And now, that responsibility belonged to Luo Feng.